What is the Traxster sound? How did it come about? So, being a MC, I started making beats for me to rhyme to. And there was an era of hip hop where artists didn't really want to sample anymore because we were just starting to understand that you just couldn't use music without clearing it. So it became this sentiment in hip hop where rather than sample, you would like make beats out of very small, obscure sounds that you could find and then play them into melodies so that you wasn't necessarily using a composition of somebody's record. So in the early days of my production, I was using like little snips of sounds and creating sound. You know, I'm from Chicago. There's a house culture. And when I was a kid, you know, it was a big thing to DJ in my neighborhood. So, you know, I listened to a lot of house music, a lot of deep house music that also shaped my melodic sentiments. That combination of hip hop, my early influences, getting those keyboards, because, you know, a lot of times what I had access to was what I had access to. I didn't grow up in a, you know, wealthy family. So, you know, equipment was a dream at one point. All of that added together became the sound. So when people emulate the sound, they're just emulating what I've done before. Where I developed an ear for, you know, looping sounds, finding the right sounds to loop, to make organs, make bass sounds, learning how to filter sounds. I had the ASR 10 and it had some great filters on it. So you could really manipulate sound, and that's when I started learning how to sound design. When I was working on my earliest records and my earliest beats, it was a lot of that sound designing and creating sounds was a part of that production style. And then one day I bought some discs for the ASR 10 to get more sounds. And those discs were actual instruments. And that's when I found that I had an ear for sounds that sounded like records I had sampled in the past. as I studied music, I would hear, patterns or what I call recipes, right? This instrument, that instrument made up that sound, right? So as my sound library grew and I got my hands on more and more sounds, like I used to, every time I started a record, I would go buy a new keyboard. And that was like my tradition every album. I would buy a new keyboard and rewire the studio to get better cables to connect them with. So when you listen to my earliest records, that's one set of equipment, and every subsequent album, the equipment changed. All the great producers, it's very hard to emulate what they do. You can have the same keyboards, the same sounds, but it's something about the way they feel through the music that makes them unique. So the Traxster sound obviously starts with me, but it's really about, this pursuit of the perfect beat and this exploration of all the sound in the world, right? Every possible sound, every possible option. And obviously in 2025, there's so many options that I'll never go through every sound that's on my, in my library now. The fun part of it is trying to, and continuing to push the boundaries of my natural, instinctive production style. People who made beats prior to me in hip hop, they used keyboard sounds. There was kind of a disdain for that sound in hip hop, right? Like, especially not like analog keyboards, but like digital keyboards, right? That sounded poppy or R&B to people. But that experience I had transitioning through, my early stages of production, I learned how to identify the sounds that sounded like records. So when I would play things, they would still have some soul to them. My first hits reflected that, right? And I think what I brought to hip hop was you could compose a record with these keyboards and it still sound like hip hop, right? And it was because of that transition through my different styles. The experience of growing up in Chicago, all the musical influences that came from both coasts also influenced that sound. I had a record on Lambs that I talk about. All I wanted was a Chevy with sounds. And that influenced the type of music I made because my homeboys only wanted to hear 808s knocking in the Chevys. So it's like, even when you listen to Po Pimp and you hear that long 808, that's inspired by that Chevy culture, right? The sounds culture. Because I would try to surprise the listener with that explosion of bass, occasionally. So there's a lot of nuances to why I made the decisions I made as I grew as a producer.